Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Season 3 is kicking this week. On this week's episode of Cinemacast, right here on YouTube and on Rumble. If you guys have yet to do so, please hit that like, follow, and subscribe down below, depending on which platform you're following us on. So let's talk about today's feature. This is a unique one that I went into with low expectations and for reasons. This is the 2025 release of the PlayStation game adaptation into movie Until Dawn. Now, if you're not familiar with Until Dawn on the PlayStation, or if you are a PC gamer as well, you can get this game on Steam. I believe the game is still $50 for a game that's been out since 2015, I believe it was. I remember when I got the game for PS4 back in 2015, and it was a very unique survival horror game. There was not a lot of input action to it. There was some interaction with it, but I will say, like, the story, the gameplay, the atmosphere, everything with the game, it was just top notch for a survival horror game of these standards, you know. And it was, I want to say, it was sort of something new at the time, especially with the PlayStation's hardware, with the PS4 camera. So with the game, if you had the PS4 camera, which of course I did at the time, and you got it hooked up, there was a special feature with the game where if you select a certain setting, it can access your PlayStation camera, and at certain times when there's a jump scare, it will capture 5 seconds of that scene along with you sitting right there in front of the camera, getting your reaction with it. And that was pretty cool, you know. It was a cool thing. It was something, I guess, that the developers wanted to see or make sure that this was something very genuine for the gamers, for the fans of survival horror and horror games all around. And it sure was one of those games that I just absolutely adored at the time. But sadly, I only played through and beat the game once. Now, the game does have several endings. It's one of those rare games that has several endings. And there's a lot of games out there that are like that. You know, games like Resident Evil, where whether you end up saving the other character or leaving them behind, and you end up leaving the island, leaving the mansion, whatever, and then you get a different ending, you know. And also there was different endings for different difficulties as well. And another game that did it very well way back on PlayStation 1 was Dino Crisis. And I didn't even know Dino Crisis had more than 3 or 4 different endings to it. It all depicted on what choices you make in the game and how you play. And that is the criteria for the game Until Dawn. So basically, you are playing as the brother, and you go into the cabin with, I think it's like 6 or 7 other friends of yours, and something happens. I forgot how the story went. It's been so long, but I remember that there was a slasher-type villain, a psycho serial killer, in this cabin that's stalking each and every player, every character. And it looks like it kills them at the time, or it just kidnaps them, captures them, and puts them into a trap. Kind of like the Saw movies, where they put you in a trap and you got a certain amount of time to do a puzzle or something to get them out of that trap. And of course, if they end up dying, or it looks like they end up dying, then, you know, it is what it is. Or you pass the challenge and they survive. But within the game, the first half of the game, it had you in suspense. You know, you were hiding from this killer. You had to be quiet. You know, every step you made had to be, you know, silent as you can make it. You know, that kind of thing. You know, but it turned out that the first half of the game ends up like one of those movies where you got the serial killer. He's out to kill, you know, this group of teenagers, and then in the end, it turns out to be like some big prank, ha ha, got you kind of thing on one person. Which basically what it was. But then the second half of the game actually turns into survival horror, where your choices for each character does matter for the end game. and you go up against these creatures, these mythological creatures known as Wendigos, in the forest surrounding this cabin. And this time around, each character does die off, or you can choose to save them for survival toward the end. And then when you reach the end of the game, you beat the game. It tells you who all survived, who all died, gives you a different ending, gives you a different outlook for each character, which is pretty neat. It's pretty cool. So this is one of those games, like, I want to say maybe it's like, I don't know, anywhere between 6 and 10 hours long, maybe, or maybe a little bit shorter, but there is a lot of replayability with the game, and it gets you hooked every time. And then, of course, here it is about 10 years later. Let me go back and see when the game actually did come out. Let's see. I gotta type it in here. Until Dawn. Okay, 2015. So yeah, 10 years later since the game's release, we now have the feature film Until Dawn, which was distributed by Sony and produced by Screen Gem Productions. PlayStation Productions, there's only some movies that they have actually released within the last, I want to say 10 years, maybe? And let's see. Now, looking at, PlayStation Productions, of course, looking at all the films that they have put together, all the films that they're getting ready to release, the first one under them was Uncharted, of course. And that movie starred, what's his name? Spider-Man, of course. I can't remember his name. I think it was Tom Holland. Yeah, Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg was in that movie. I didn't fully watch that movie. I actually ended up falling asleep during it. But, I love the Uncharted game, so I got to get back into watching that. I heard that was really good. Another movie that was extremely good, and I already did a review on it, so you guys could probably check that out. I think it's in Season 2 where I put it out there. Is Gran Turismo, and that is an amazing movie. It's actually based on a true story, which you would have to read up on. So it's not really wholly about the game. Well, it involves the game, Gran Turismo, but there's an amazing story behind it, and it's brilliantly told in this movie. So you guys got to check that out. I have the review up for it. And then, of course, we got Until Dawn, which just came out this past April. And I'm getting ready to talk about that. Now, there are other projects that are in development under PlayStation Productions, such as the untitled Resident Evil reboot, which is set to release next year. They're talking about Days Gone, Ghost of Tsushima, Gravity Rush, Helldivers, Horizon Zero Dawn, and another Uncharted movie, which is the sequel to it. But all those are to be announced. And then, of course, when it comes to the TV series, what you catch on HBO Max or Peacock or whatever, you got the 2 seasons of The Last of Us, and then you got Twisted Metal, which already has 1 season out, and the second season's getting ready to come out this summer. And then you got God of War. They're in development of a God of War series. That's going to be interesting to see. So yeah, PlayStation Productions has their hands, of course, in these movies because they're based off of the video games from PlayStation, from Sony. So, Until Dawn is an American survival horror film, which has been directed by David F. Sandberg. That's a new name for me. I don't think I've ever heard of him. Let me check his library. Okay, he doesn't have a big list. Looking at his list of films. Okay, so this director, his first debut film was Lights Out in 2016. I gotta say, Lights Out, that was a bomb for me. I know there's people out there that probably enjoyed it. It's a short movie. It's like 83 minutes long, but it's based off those horror shorts, where you watch them where the person's going upstairs and they turn the lights off, and then you see this figure appear in a hallway and they turn the light on and it disappears, that kind of thing. So yeah, they did a whole movie based around that, and to me, it just wasn't that terrifying. It wasn't that interesting. I only seen it once, but maybe there's people out there that do enjoy it. Then there's Annabelle Creation. That was a very interesting entry to the Conjuring universe. And that one, I think, was a little bit more violent in tone as opposed to the other movies. But yeah, that was a very interesting one. And of course, I don't think that's based on true events. Of course, they got to up it, just to create a horror movie out of that. And then he directed both Shazam and Shazam Fury of the Gods. I don't think I've seen the second one. I've seen the first one. First one was pretty fun. I gotta see if I have a review up for Shazam. If not, I gotta review that movie sometime. And of course, we got the most recent Until Dawn, which was also produced by him. And he has a lot of shorts, and he produced, he actually directed and composed a few episodes for a television show called Earth Savers. Other than that, I mean, that's all he has under his belt. Like, he went from the worst to the best, in my opinion. So, Until Dawn. It is derived from the 2015 video game by PlayStation Studios and is set in the same universe while featuring an original standalone story that expands upon the game's mythology. And of course, it stars actors Ella Rubin, Michael Cimino, I guess that's how you pronounce his name, Ji Young Yoon, and a few others, as a group of friends who end up in a secluded area embedded in a time loop mechanic. A threat is out to hunt them, where dying restarts the night with a new threat each time, and the only solution is to survive until morning. And of course, actor Peter Stormare, I guess I'm pronouncing that right, Peter Stormare, reprises his role from the game. If you don't know who Peter Stormare, I have no idea how to pronounce his name. He's a Swedish actor. He was in a lot of different movies, of course. I've seen him in a lot of movies. He's a familiar face. He was in movies like Fargo, The Lost World, Jurassic Park. He was in Armageddon, Mercury Rising, 8mm, Minority Report, Bad Boys 2, 2001 Maniacs. I don't think I remember him being in that, but okay. And he was also pretty big in some video games recently. He was in a lot of TV shows I see. Video game-wise, if you guys remember him, he was the replacer in Call of Duty Black Ops 2, Black Ops 3. He was in a few of the Elder Scrolls games. So yeah, he is the replacer in Black Ops, the Black Ops series. So if you play Call of Duty Black Ops, you've probably seen his face in there, the replacer. So actor Peter Stormare is in this movie, and he pretty much portrays the main villain of the whole movie, who watches over everything as it pretty much happens day by day. Now, the game is much different than the premise of the movie, and I'm not going to go too much into the plot of the movie because there is a little bit to talk about, so I'm not going to spoil most of the story for you guys. But let's just say the game is much different than the movie. The game is straight up, you go to a cabin, you're in this isolated cabin, there's a killer, and it turns out that, it's basically one of the friends who's playing a prank on everybody because of the death of his sister or girlfriend or whoever it was. I forgot what it was. And then, of course, you're surrounded by Wendigos in the forest, the forest surrounding the cabin and all. So that is one aspect of the game that is in the movie, is the Wendigos. But I think the lore of the Wendigos in the movie has a very unique stretch to them. It's very interesting in how it leads up to the creation of the Wendigos. So as you see in the trailer, and I'm pretty sure everybody's seen the trailer by now, yes, it's one of those movies that's kind of like, what is it, Happy Death Day to me, where every time you die, you restart the next day over. It has the Groundhog effect, the Groundhog Day effect, If you ever seen the movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray, and every time he dies, he wakes up, the very next day, with the same music playing on the radio, same room, everything that he's in. So, yeah, it's interesting seeing movies like that come along every so often. Groundhog's Day, pretty much. I don't know if it was the first of its kind to set that standard, and especially for it to be carried over into horror movies. And of course, you've got movies like Happy Death Day to me, and that is pretty much like, I don't want, maybe like a parody in a sense, but it's a comedy horror. I haven't seen it myself, but I know the premise of it. But then you got movies like Until Dawn, which is a more serious survival horror film. It does have a little bit of comedic value to it, which tries to lighten the tone a little bit. But then this movie was advertised to be like, oh, this is one of the scariest movies of 2025. Let me put this out there. For somebody like me who's grown up on horror, and I love horror. I love the horror genre. I've seen a lot of movies. I've seen a lot of duds. And let me tell you, this movie, it has its on the edge of your seat thrills, but it's not going to scare you to death. Now, it's very interesting in how the movie plays out. So, in the movie, they all come to this remote cabin looking for the disappeared sister of one of the girls. And they make their way out to the cabin in this rainstorm. And the biggest thing that is like a big, just like the first big red flag for them is when they get to the cabin, they're driving around and pouring down rain, and then suddenly it just ends, but it's still pouring. It's like a wall of water coming down, and then you get into the area surrounding the cabin, and it's all dry, and there's like nothing going on. So yeah, it's like, yeah, red flag for the cabin. So once they all get sucked in, and one of the girls signs into this book inside the cabin, that's when things start to take a turn, and they notice that there's this hourglass that is on the wall, and it begins to turn itself each night. And the first night they notice it, that's when they're stalked by this psycho serial killer in a mask. And of course, he kills them in some gruesome ways. And mind you, if you're thinking that an M-rated game is going to get a PG-13 release, no, this is an R-rated film. So you're good there. It's a horror movie. You're going to see some deaths. You're going to see some kills. Don't worry, this movie is R-rated. So the first night, each character does get killed off. No big spoiler there because you see it in the trailer. And then, of course, when the hourglass runs out, it turns itself, winds itself back around, starts the next night. Everybody gets deja vu the same exact way. And then they're pretty much like their souls refreshed into their new bodies. And they know that, oh my God, I just died, didn't I? And each night, something different happens. The first night, you got a psycho serial killer slasher that's killing them. The second night, you got something that ends up possessing one of the girls. And then it's just something paranormal happens. Like it's a witch that's out to kill them. That kind of thing. And of course, if whatever doesn't kill them that night, you got the psycho that comes out and ends up killing everybody else off, finishing them off. And then it goes on to the next night. So the movie's plot line is unpredictable when you first go into the movie, and I'm not going to tell you the rest because I want you guys to be able to see this movie for yourselves, because each night, each scene with these characters, it's different, unique in a certain way with how they die off or what kills them next. But it's like every night is different. They die a different way. There's a different killer. There's a different force until they figure out, oh my God, we got to figure out how to stay alive. And of course, there is a nice little twist in the movie that comes about halfway up until the end that relates to the Wendigos, which I'm not going to tell you guys, of course. I'm not going to spoil it for you. But I will say, after watching this movie, okay, so the music score in this movie, I did enjoy it. There was some music tracks throughout this movie that gave it its atmosphere, and I like any other horror movie that you see has just this dull, bland score that you swear you heard elsewhere in another horror movie, whereas with this one, yes, it feels like a typical slasher movie, sort of, it's like, I've seen them all before. Well, this one, you may have seen something like this before, but it is a little more different, and it's definitely more different than the video game. So if you played the video game like I have, trust me, you're going into this movie probably with the same expectations, but I will say go into it with low expectations, because We all know the video game adaptation curse. Ever since 1993 with Super Mario Brothers and movies like Double Dragon, Mortal Kombat, Resident Evil, Wing Command, any movie that has been adapted from a video game, we all know it's either a big miss or it's a slight hit. We had hits like Mortal Kombat, Resident Evil. We had Rampage a few years ago with Dwayne Johnson in it. You got Uncharted, Tomb Raider. So there are some misses. There are some video game adaptations that they end up being, like the shit at the bottom of the barrel that you pick out. And then you got your gems that are sitting on top and you got to pick them out, whatever you want to choose wisely, that kind of thing, So when you see a movie that is based off a video game, probably something that you don't even know. Maybe you're somebody who's not a gamer and you never heard of Until Dawn, and then you say, oh, based off the popular PlayStation video game. You're like, oh, nope, I don't want to see it. No, trust me, you'll want to go see this movie, especially if you hear good reviews about this movie. And like I said, the curse was broken years ago with several different movies, so it seems like a lot of these production companies, you got a lot of great writers that know the source material. They know what the video game is. They know what the story is. They know the characters. They study it very well for the movie, and they get it in there. And this one, somebody studied the game, but they made it its own entity. They made it much different. They gave it the same setting, basically. You're in a cabin. There's a lot of things that happen at the cabin. There's a lot of nods to the video games, like the Wendigo, the serial killer, how many people are in the cabin, all this great stuff. So this movie, I will say, when you go into watching it, go in with low expectations and an open mind. And if you like it, you like it. If you don't, then it was just a one-timer. So, looking at the reception of this movie, now, you guys know I'm probably going to give this a good grade, right? Because I never go off of critics. I do speak of critic reviews on the podcast when I'm talking about movies. And of course, one of the biggest ones, which is Rotten Tomatoes, I think they're a liberal site. I think they're liberal ran. I don't care too much for Rotten Tomatoes. They gave the movie 52% of 103 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 5.5 out of 10. The website's consensus reads, Until Dawn has a novel premise by rewinding the clock repeatedly to deliver multiple horror movies in one, but a lack of inspiration in each new variation yields a spoil of diminishing returns rather than riches. I will say that too. Like, the main focus of the movie is when each character is killed off, how they're killed off, and what they're killed off by. That's mostly what you're aiming to see. And of course, you have the other part of the plot where, okay, they're going to try to figure out how to survive. They got to try to figure out how to beat this. Why can't they get past this part of the night? Why can't they get past this killer or that killer or this entity? What is happening to them? And of course, there is something that does happen to them, or is slowly happening to them as part of the movie as the story rolls on. So yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things the movie has for it, is everybody feels like there's just multiple horror movies all tacked into one. Kind of like an anthology, but it's not an anthology. You basically have different scenes with different horror movie aspects in there. One of them could be a slasher, one of them could be a paranormal, one of them could be, a thriller in a sense or whatever. It's got that going for it, but there is some things that it can lack at times, and the movie only runs, I think, about an hour and 40 minutes in. So that's just enough time to get you in there, get you settled in with this movie. And of course, you may feel like toward the end, there could have been something more to it. There could have been a little bit more explanation. There could have been a little bit more we want to see more kills. We want to see more, killers. We want to see more horror. We want to see a little bit more of this. What was that I saw outside? What was that I saw down there in the cave? I want to know a little bit more of that. So there could have been a little bit more explanation to certain scenes to explain them or show a little bit more. Maybe you saw something and you want to see them die in that way. Who knows? But yeah, it even though it delivers on some aspects throughout the movie and other areas, it kind of falls short. And I hate to say that about this movie. It does kind of fall short in certain areas. So it is pretty well mixed. Louis Peitzman of Vulture wrote that Until Dawn has a pile of ideas that threaten to collapse the movie under its own weight, but praised its creativity and meta-commentary on the slasher genre. He concluded that the film was saved by its humor, comparing it favorably to The Cabin in the Woods. Cabin in the Woods was another interesting take on horror, and that's another one I will have to review in the future too, because that one, it just has a mind-boggling amount of different feedback. Well, what do you call them? A bunch of different nods to the horror genre. A bunch of different nods, with the different horror icons, horror legends, like Pinhead and such. But you don't have Pinhead in there. You got somebody else. So that has an original feel to it, and it was very interesting. So I guess you could say it's almost kind of like movies like The Cabin in the Woods. RogerEbert.com's Brian Tallarico gave the film 1.5 stars out of 4. Of course, it's from Roger Ebert, writing that the film had really clever ideas but a lackluster execution. He added that Maxime Alexandre's cinematography was underlit and depressingly flat, finding the video game's visual language to be stronger, which is true. Which is really true. The cinematography, there's a lot of things that really did fall flat with the movie as you watch it. But I will say, the biggest hook for anybody is the fact that, okay, several nights are occurring, and each night is something different, and that's what draws you in. So it pretty much takes your focus off of what the end game is going to be for the movie. You're watching it, you're on the edge of your seat, you want to know what happens next, you want to know what these characters are going to go through next, what's happening to them. That is your hook. There is a payoff in the end, but it's not real big. But I will say that this movie has some real good entertainment value going on for it. So even though there is a lackluster in some areas, for the most part, there is a lot of positivity going on with this movie. And I'm not going to read too much more because there is a lot more going on with the critical response with this movie. But I will say, for a video game adaptation, Until Dawn, it definitely does deliver. It's probably something that you may not watch over and over and over again. Maybe a once in a while kind of movie. I have no idea. But I will say this was a very entertaining flick. It was very entertaining, to say the least. And it just had a lot of different styles to it. The score to the movie, it definitely fit its tone. It almost kind of looks like it may want to, even looking at the trailer or the movie poster that you guys are looking at right now, kind of feel like maybe The Evil Dead mixed with Cabin in the Woods kind of thing, So this movie, knowing what you guys know right now, yes, it is an adaptation of the video game. It sort of follows along with the video game, but it's much, much different with the aspect of, okay, everybody's dead, time to loop back over and redo the whole day and kill them off in a different way. That's an interesting aspect you don't see too much in movies nowadays. You only see it in certain movies. You know, it started out with movies like Groundhog's Day. There was one that Tom Cruise was in called Edge of Tomorrow, which was an action thriller, a sci-fi action thriller, which is still a good movie. You got movies like Happy Death Day to Me, which I still yet to see, but I heard they're pretty good. So you got movies like that that carry that aspect over, and Until Dawn, I think it does it pretty well for the type of movie it is. So after seeing Until Dawn, even though the critics give it like a 5.5, I gotta say I will give Until Dawn an 8 out of 10. This movie was definitely fun. I really did enjoy it. I didn't want to stop it at any point during the movie. It was well worth the wait. You know, I was in speculation of it. You know, I didn't know if I wanted to see it. I didn't know if I wanted to give it another chance. But I'm glad I gave it a chance. It was well worth it. You guys, I recommend checking it out. And that does it for today's episode of Cinemacast, guys. Thank you for joining me today for today's feature, Until Dawn, right here on the podcast. If you guys have yet to do so, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that follow button down below. If you're watching us on YouTube or on Rumble, be sure you follow us on social media, Twitter, and on Discord. If you guys are on Discord, give us a follow on there for updates on future streams, more episodes of Cinemacast, vlogs, and more. Once again, guys, thank you for joining me today for today's podcast, today's episode. And until next time, guys, I'll catch you right back here at the cinema.